Good morning.
Hi, Rach. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. How's Switzerland?
It's rainy and cold. We have this
Yeah.
stretch of like 36 degrees. So it is rain, but it's snow. And it
Oh,
switches back and forth as it wants to. And it's totally fine. I mean, it's just winter,
right.
but it's
It's
definitely
winter.
nice to be inside and be cozy and warm.
Yes. You're all about the cozy.
Yeah, that's my cozy.
Um, do you ski?
I do not. Rob is a big skier and he has been since he was little. And Duke has been on skis since he was 3.
Uh-huh.
So they are awesome skiers. I have known too many people who have blown out their ACL.
Oh,
And I just, I don't, I'm also not a roller coaster person. So that
oh,
sensation of like going downhill quickly
right.
does not bring me joy.
Got it.
Uh, so that's a long answer to say, no, I'm not a skier. I happily get my old lady hiking poles
Oh,
and
well,
go
that's fun
hiking
too.
in the
Right.
snow while they go skiing. How about you?
That
Are you a
sounds good.
skier?
I'm a very beginner, and actually for my birthday last year, I got skis. So I will hopefully have the same conversation with you in the spring and say, yeah, I'm an advanced beginner this year. So I
Good.
mean, yeah, so should be fun.
Where will you go? I mean, are the
There are a
Poconos
bunch of
close?
there are a bunch of
Okay,
mountains. Like there's one that's 15 minutes from here. The one Jen likes is like 40 minutes from here. So it's easy.
day trip level.
Yes, exactly.
Good, good.
How
Let's
are
let
you,
everybody else
Jess?
jump in. Hi, Jess.
Hey,
Are you a
Sarah.
skier?
No, I went once in my life and it was exhilarating while it lasted. I was on like the baby mountain with the children and I couldn't figure out how to stop like pizza shape it didn't
Oh
work
yeah.
so I just like went straight into this plastic fence at the end of the mountain and I remember being like it took me like an hour to get all this gear on and it's done. But it seems like it would be really fun. I have zero experience though, I've only done it one time.
I feel like we should all have that beginner's mindset. Like Paula, you're going to be a beginner and a beginner's mind toward it. But this is the one thing. It's like if I die and I'm not never got good at skiing, I'm okay with that. Like it's okay. Sean, are you a skier?
I am not a skier. I am a snowboarder,
Ooh.
and I don't do a ton of it. I did maybe like 20 years ago when my oldest was little because he was into it, and we had tons of fun. And we took a big break, and then just recently my daughter got into it. My brother and my nephew, they're huge snowboarders, so we go with them every now and again.
So you've been doing it since you were like a teenager, or when did you learn?
Probably, yeah, my like early 20s, and then it was like a couple years real hard, and then like nothing, and then just recently we got back a little bit like here and there. I'm not a big fan of cold, but when you're snowboarding you're not that cold, like you feel kind of warm inside and good and stuff. So yeah, my daughter got into it because she was hanging out with my nephew, and then my brother got back into it, so I went with him. So yeah, it was it's good. I enjoy it. It's just we don't have a lot of time for it.
And it
Was
looks
it
really
like
hard.
riding a bike?
So surprisingly, it was like riding a bike. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like heel toe, and you kind of get in the groove of it. Once you find your groove and get confident again, you're fine.
That's
And then you get
reassuring.
overconfident and you hit that front edge and you plant your face on the snow. But yeah, good little dose of humility right there.
Sarah, did you ski when you were in Colorado? I feel like it's such a
Snowboard.
culture there. You snowboard as well.
Oh,
Sarah's
yeah,
like a
you would like,
big time snowboarder.
no, not a big time. I can
I
stay
think
on my
you're being
feet going
modest.
down. No, well, that's why I asked Sean, like, is it like riding a bike? Because it's been years, but I'd love to go again. Um, but yeah, some really great spots out in Colorado. I didn't I didn't go as much as you would think, because I was like, in my early 20s and bartending and waiting tables and the grind that they put service industry folks through. So
Working weekends,
Yeah.
double shifts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think about the number of double shifts that I've done in my life and like how I didn't even like think like you didn't even bat an eye when they were like, "Hey, we need you to work a double today," and you'd be like, "Okay." I would never be okay with that today. My goodness.
I feel like it's a special period of life that I want everyone to experience. Like my child, I want him to wait tables. Because even I was just
Oh
listening, and
yeah.
this gets us into what we're going to talk about today. But I've been listening to a lot of Brene Brown because she has a new book out, Atlas of the Heart, and it's all about the science of emotions and labeling the 87 different emotions. And she
87.
was talking about how she was a server and a bartender for 7 years as she did bartended through grad school, which is what I did as well. So I would first of all I was like, yeah, Brene. But then she was talking about how when you get in the weeds, uh, beyond that, even when you're just totally blown and like there's nothing you can do, you just have to step away into nothingness in the walk-in cooler or go outside and have a cigarette, which is what she did in 1985, and just be. And it was so relatable, and I thought, what a cool way, because I think a lot of us when we work those kinds of service industry jobs, we feel like, what am I doing with my life? At least I had that feeling. And
Yeah.
to look back and say, actually, there are so many lessons that even a social scientist like Brene Brown can apply from that time of her life. And none of our practice is without value.
And I think it teaches you so much about, just like, I think there's a lot to glean from just that. Like when you are so, so buried and so like that moment where you do have to let go. We used to like jokingly support each other. Like if we would see somebody having a really difficult time, just, the person that had like worked the ticket machine for the waitresses or something, you'd be like, hey, like you're only weeded if you care, like we would joke with each other, like, um, this is only as like heavy and horrible as you allow it to be. But I think it teaches you so much about, like you see people on their worst behavior when you're service, like in the service industry, the clientele, like you really see how like that like, I don't know. I had some really like horrible experiences where I'm just like, wow, like this person's really treating me like I'm less than. It was very clear. So I think like I would love my boys to wait tables for that experience too, because I wouldn't have to like always stay connected to every part of every experience they're having. And I think, the customer service and the service industry, I feel like those are two very humbling worlds where you're like really exposed to um, the best and the worst of people.
I have some friends who have
And I just
only
got
ever
Brene
done.
Brown's book in the
I'm sorry,
mail.
go ahead. Oh, you got it.
Oh, I
Good.
said I got it. Yeah.
We're going to talk about it later. So that's perfect. I was just going to say, I have some friends who have only ever worked in academia. Like even in their 20s, they never waited tables. They went straight from grad school to a professor or whatever. And I almost feel sad for them that they didn't get to have that experience because it's also such an embodied job. I mean, you're moving and sweating and twisting and reaching. And I always actually use bartending as an example when I'm teaching about Ujjayi breath and how it can calm the nervous system. Because I remember on a slam Friday night when we were 4 people deep and I had 62 things to make, and then somebody ordered 2 mojitos, I would like go to the draft beer, and literally you had to be still when you were pouring a draft beer because you have to stand there and hold the cup and hold it, the tap, and you can't go anywhere. And I would stand there and realize I was doing Ujjayi breathing at the tap, like, and it worked. So it was this moment when I went, okay, my practice is really in my body now. Because here in this moment, when I want to freak out and run out of the bar, I can calm my body down and find the breath and recenter. So it's everywhere. That said, we should probably jump in. So where we left off before Thanksgiving was just at the end of the mindful eating. And we have one sort of short meditation that is meta for our bodies that we'll take, and then jump right into lesson 5, which is all about emotions and mindfulness of feelings. So it feels appropriate actually to do metta for our bodies after Thanksgiving, because sometimes, especially here in this holiday season, as we um, go to holiday parties or have big feasts or whatnot, and maybe um, it can be harder on our bodies or less gentle with our bodies. This is a good opportunity to come back to that energy. So coming to our bodies with loving kindness, wondering how we can cultivate a more tender and gentle and loving relationship with our bodies. We talked about, distracted eating or eating while we use technology or emotional eating and all those different ways that sometimes we try to care for ourselves in the way we eat, less than mindfully. And I think here of Janine Roth, who says, if you're going to eat at the refrigerator, pull up a chair. So that even in a moment like that, when you're trying to care for yourself, but maybe in not the most clear way, you can find gentleness for yourself. Even as you pull up to the refrigerator and shovel the cake in, you're sitting and beginning that step toward finding tenderness and presence. So we looked at this, and I think we'll just move right through it, talking about how important it is to care for the body and reframe our relationship with our bodies. And here we are at medieval mystic Meister Eckhart. Has anybody heard of Meister Eckhart? A really brilliant, famous dude. Now that I know Deutsch, Meister just means like master. So like the European Football Championship is called the Europameister. So it makes me realize that Eckhart maybe didn't even have a first name. He was just known as Master Eckhart. But he was a mystic during the medieval times and quite famously said, if the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you, that would be enough. And as I follow my own faith journey and kind of watch it twist and turn, I find myself coming back to this, that if we can come back to this mantra of thank you, kind of everything else falls into place after that. So with that in mind, we're going to sit for a brief meditation. That is actually our opening meditation today, just honoring the body as a teacher. So if you want to just come to any comfortable seat or a position that feels good in your body this morning, settle in, finding your tall spine, softening your face, any of those muscles, maybe around your lips or your jaw that might be tight, your forehead. And then feeling that sort of warm softness as it moves down into your shoulders. And then anything that's heavy, weighing on your shoulders right now, just let it kind of slip and slide off. Letting your breath be whatever kind of natural rhythm it wants to be this morning. Noticing your hands, if they're clenched or tense, relax them too. Really dropping into your body as an old friend. And using the mantra today of thank you. You can quietly yoke your mind to that mantra and at your own pace. Think about repeating to yourself, thank you, body. If you want to scan different parts of your body, your shoulders, your heart, your brain, your toes, feel free to do a simple body scan. And with every location in your body, simply repeat internally. Thank you, elbow. Thank you, belly. Dropping into the quiet here and letting this really simple spirit of seeing your body as it is, accepting it exactly as it is today, and offering a thanks for walking along with you every step of the way to this point. As we begin to wrap up this meditation, turn your attention to your breath. And for a final breath or two, offer gratitude to your lungs and that very breath itself. Thank you, breath, for breathing me alive. And then as you're ready, and only when you're completely ready, you can gently begin to open your eyes, coming back into this room here together. Anybody want to share how that felt in your body?
So these body scans kind of get me because I guess when I'm doing my regular practice in the mornings, the short ones, they just, I don't really focus on that. But when I do intentionally focus on like going through a full body scan, I noticed some of the not so good in my body, which I guess I would rather not focus on. So then it's just interesting how, you've got to move past it, kind of accept it and move past it anyway. Because when I talk about meditation to people and how it's been working for me and how it's been benefited my life, like I paint this like, really like, I guess, perfect picture. But when you do like a body scan while you're practicing, it's not really perfect. So like I find myself like trying to go back, like from saying, oh man, my shoulder really, really hurts. And I'm really, really tense in my neck. And I want to start like fixing all that, but it's not necessarily, the goal isn't to fix it. And sometimes that's difficult, like for me. Like I want to start stretching. Like when I get to like the part like where my neck is, and I'm like, oh, my neck is really, really tight. And my first instinct is to start like, trying to work it out. And I just have to realize that's not the goal. That could be done perhaps later, but that's not the goal for right now.
Just accepting, just sitting without fixing. It's tough.
Yeah, which is hard because I'm a problem solver. So that's difficult for me.
Was it hard to stay in that thank you mindset when you got to the parts of your body that were hurting or challenging?
No, because that is part of like, so daily, I do a lot of like thank you mantras during my regular practice. So it's kind of like at this point, really, really habitual. So part of my daily prayer is always, I thank you for life itself, and then my portion of things. So I thank you for my portion of health and my portion of strength, because I know that health isn't perfect, nor is strength always going to be at full capacity. So I'm grateful for life in and of itself. And then within life, the portion of the things that I have. And I've been focused on that for, a decade plus. So it kind of fits.
And I love how there's some impermanence in there too, recognizing that your portion is changing.
Yeah, it could be one thing one day and something different the next day.
Which feels very Buddhist. Anybody else? Cool, we can move right along then if you want. So lesson 5, mindfulness of feelings, part 1. This is a 2-part series. We'll tackle the first half today. And this is something I want to start with from Susan David, PhD, who I'll be talking about a lot a little bit later. But she has this great quote that says, "Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life." And I think this kind of follows along with what Sean was saying earlier about, this idea, especially from the outside, that meditation and mindfulness practices should make your life perfect and peachy and blissful, and that it's always a blissful experience. But in fact, it's, so often much more complicated than that and multifaceted emotionally. And what Susan David really does is say, happiness isn't being perky and positive all the time. Happiness and fulfillment and true emotional agility all come from allowing ourselves to feel all the feelings, even the difficult ones, even the uncomfortable ones, even the frustrating ones. And that's what really brings meaning to our life. So our focus is in cultivating self-awareness. And without self-awareness, meeting feelings mindfully is not really possible. And I love this because we wrote this content 2 years ago. And just today, I was listening to Brene Brown speaking about her new book, Atlas of the Heart. And she was talking about how the whole point, the takeaway with Oprah, was self-awareness. That we can't guess what somebody else is feeling, especially because we have different lenses. She used the example that if she sees her assistant, who is a 25-year-old Black woman from Arizona and a single mom, and she sees that she's suffering, Brene Brown cannot know why she's suffering because her lens as a 55-year-old white woman from Texas is different. And so in terms of self-awareness, we can't have responsibility for knowing what other people are feeling or fixing what other people are feeling, but we can have responsibility for what we are feeling. And the more we can dial into that self-awareness, the more we have the capacity to truly connect and to do it in a healthy, non-toxic way. We'll get further into that. But
I just
go
need to
ahead.
hop in for a sec.
Uh-huh.
That just like pinged all these pings in my body and my mind as a mother, right? Because I feel like I do know what my kids are feeling and I can fix it. And that was just like huge, like a light bulb. So yeah, really, that was
Which
good
is
stuff.
interesting though, because you do share cells with your children. I mean, they
Ooh,
are of you, right? And so the lens there might be more overlapping than the lens of Brene and her assistant from
Mhm.
Arizona.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there is some psychosomatic connection there that does tune you into their emotions more than it would tune you into
Right.
mine,
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty deep, huh? Profound.
Yeah.
And I
We'll
love
have
that
to ask Brene.
we'll bring her on, meet your center. But even that is a great example of how your lens just lent complexity and depth to our conversation because you saw it from your lens as a mother.
Right.
And pointed that out that maybe other people wouldn't have realized. So emotions, and I'll say right away, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a sociologist by training. So if you have questions that really go in depth here, I can refer you to the right people, but I do not have a PhD in psychology. We're going to start with emotion scientist Paul Ekman, PhD, who is from the 1970s in San Francisco, UCSF. And he really sort of set the standard for talking about how emotions are a process. And they prepare us to deal with important events without having to think about them. We don't choose to feel our emotions, right? They happen to us automatically. And Ekman argues that of all the human emotions we experience, there are 6 universal emotions that we all feel, and they transcend language, region, cultural, and ethnic differences. Brene again put it in a really relatable way. She said, okay, your emotions are in the driver's seat. Your mental and cognitive and rational powers are hogtied in the trunk, and they're coming along, but your emotions are doing the driving. And I think that is sort of parallels what Paul Ekman says here. So there are 3 elements of emotions. There's a subjective experience, the physiological response you have in that moment, and the behavioral response. And so in these two, the second and third, that's where we see the mindfulness power come in, because we have the opportunity to choose how to respond rather than to react to our emotions. So I'm sure some of you have maybe heard of Jill Bolte Taylor. Is her name familiar? Yeah, she is a Harvard-trained neuroscientist who became very famous for this TED Talk right here. And it's also available as a podcast. So every person I name in this lesson has 47 different great podcast interviews out there. I would highly recommend when you're on your commute, just type in some of these names, because even if you don't have time to read Jill Bolte Taylor's book, you'll have a 60-minute conversation with her and someone brilliant and learn the gist of it. But what she basically says is emotions really only have a lifespan of 90 seconds maximum. However, I think all of us probably could agree that we've had experiences in our lives when, an emotion stuck with us a whole lot longer than 90 seconds. And Jill Bolte Taylor says, there's the actual emotion, but then there's the holding on to the emotion or the thinking about it all the time that sort of perseverates in our minds and in our bodies and keeps us in that state of anger or fear or anxiety. And she had a stroke and has such a fascinating story, because as a neuroscientist, she knew what was happening even as half of her brain was no longer operating. And she managed to recover. And her TED Talk tells this whole story as she holds a real brain there. And her story is really just incredible. So highly recommend that. So in the 1970s, we talked about Paul Ekman and his 6 core emotions. And they were anger, fear, disgust, happiness, surprise, and sadness. And as the years went by, he added a 7th, contempt. And here on the right, you see the Atlas of Emotions that he developed for the Dalai Lama, which ironically has 5 emotions. So we're embracing fluidity. And I kind of like the fact that as he continued his research, he evolved in terms of what he had initially described. And so Ekman is also the guy who was a scientific advisor on the movie Inside Out. Has everybody seen this movie? Yeah. And so, of course, the characters pictured here are fear and disgust and sadness and joy and anger, right? And every therapist I know loves this movie because it's actually quite similar to the IFS approach of the parts, right?
I thought the IFS guy was
he was
served for
an
Inside Out
advisor
too.
as well. Yes, I think they really tapped into all the big ones. And this is, I think, a nice sort of down-to-earth way to see how his work continues to show up in the world. So what did Paul Ekman discover? I'm just going to try to pull you guys lower so we can see each other. He discovered that some facial expressions of emotion are universal. He also discovered micro facial expressions, so those very small movements we might make to express. And his theory is that these basic human emotions are innate and shared by everyone, and that they are accompanied across cultures by similarly universal facial expressions. When you do a Google image search, you'll see all kinds of images of people making scared, happy, sad faces in relation to his work. So he says that emotions occur in response to some kind of stimulus. So it's an actual stimulus, maybe it's imagined, or it's relived, like a physical event, a social interaction, a remembering or an imagining of an event, or a talking about, a thinking about, or physically reenacting a past emotional experience. So how do we practice emotional awareness? First of all, we have to acknowledge we don't choose the emotions we experience, right? However, our responses do shape our experiences of the world. So in order to choose our responses a little more mindfully and wisely, we have to first become more aware of and familiar with our own emotional experiences. So this is where we get back to self-awareness. So this is a wonderful 6-step protocol for meeting difficult feelings. Let's slide you over so you can see everything. And this is from the Gottman Institute, which is another one that might be worth your time to
perfect.
follow.
I get
right?
their daily emails. They're good.
Ah, perfect. Yes. I'm amazed by how many free resources are out there. So something like that, daily emails, or Susan David. I just love her Instagram feed. Everything she posts teaches me something profound. So highly recommend following all these folks. So the 6 steps to mindfully deal with difficult emotions are: first, turn toward your emotions with acceptance. Become aware of the emotion and identify where you sense it in your body. The second step is to identify and label the emotion. And you can just say to yourself, okay, this is anger, or this is anxiety. And sometimes I like to say, isn't that interesting? This is fear. And those 3 words at the beginning, isn't that interesting? Kind of take away some of the charge and introduce a spirit of curiosity and exploration. 3, accept your emotions. So don't deny them and feeling, just acknowledge and accept, okay, I feel angry right now. Number 4, realize the impermanence of your emotions. So even if the emotion feels overwhelming, remember that it will pass. It will not last forever. 5, inquire and investigate. You can ask yourself, what triggered me? What really brought this on? Why do I feel this way? Again, without judgment, just thinking, isn't that interesting? What triggered me here? And then 6, let go of the need to control your emotions. Be open to the outcome of your emotions and what unfolds. And I will say, I find parenting has been such a great teacher in terms of all of these steps, helping, like Jess, as your little guy hits his toddler just stretch, and they have such big feelings and they don't know how to manage them. It's like these steps serve small children and big children in the same way. All of us sort of on the path. So we're going to do a short meditation for meeting difficult emotions. And for this one, focus on a feeling or emotion with which you maybe struggle. Here again are the 6 types that Ekman identified. So maybe you want to look at that, and that might make you think of one of those. Moving beyond this 1970s version of the emotions, in the 1980s, Robert Plutchik created the Wheel of Emotions. And this really expands upon the nuances of those 6 emotions. And as you can see here, when you look at the edge of this circle, so the feeling is less intense. So maybe here you feel bored, okay? And this is a sort of a blending of contempt and remorse. And then as that emotion intensifies, it becomes loathing. And these are the top 10 emotions that he mentions. But this wheel is useful because it can give us a little more language. Brene Brown was saying that in her research, she discovered that when you ask people what emotions they can identify in their bodies, most people can find 3: happiness, sadness, and anger. And so a wheel of emotions like this can help to give us tools to more clearly name, I feel apprehensive right now, or I feel terror, and the depth of those feelings. So take a moment or 2 to decide which feeling you might think about, and then just come into your comfortable seat. Again, eyes closed if that feels good, or kind of gently half open if you prefer. Your feet can be grounded on the floor, on a stool. You could sit in a cross-legged position, whatever feels good. Hands comfortably resting on your thighs, or maybe with your palms up in your lap. Just come into that comfortable seat. Coming into the sort of natural, rhythmic breath. Imagine something difficult, a challenging feeling that you might be going through. It doesn't have to be the most difficult, but something moderately difficult. We want to practice with moderation before we move into the most difficult. Now, recognize if you have a desire to push away this difficult feeling, to reach towards something that would soothe the difficulty in the moment, reaching out to someone, chocolate,
Mhm.
distracting with technology, or even denying that this difficulty is actually happening. Now turn toward it. Breathe deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth a few times. See if you can just name whatever you might be feeling right now. As Tara Brach says, we name it to tame it. And now, in the spirit of investigation, see if you can locate where these feelings reside in your body. Where is it showing up today? Continuing to really investigate it with curiosity. Notice what size or shape this feeling might be. If it had a sound, what would it be? Go into the edges of this feeling. What's there? Noticing if it has a particular color or texture or weight. Remembering that this feeling is completely impermanent. It will not last forever. In a spirit of inquiry, maybe ask, does this feeling have a message for me? Listen. And let whatever arises here simply arise. And now see if you can allow it with kindness. Ask yourself, can I be with this feeling just as it is, with kindness? Can I hold it tenderly? Be open to the outcome of whatever this moment might hold. Always remembering to ground it in gentleness and self-compassion. And now invite into your awareness a large figure of compassion and strength who envelops you in a blanket of love, acceptance, and security. It can be a big cloud of compassion. Maybe it's a loving grandmotherly figure. Anything that feels tender and patient and kind. Imagine this figure is holding you. Held, safe. Turn fully towards your difficulty. Face it head on. There is no need to be scared. Feel this wise being enveloping you and speaking kindly to you. It will be okay. You are okay. You are lovable. You are enough. You are not alone. And we will get through this together. Let yourself offer and receive loving and kind statements as many times as you need until your mind and body can soothe and slow down. Remembering that each time you notice yourself reaching for that old familiar way of turning away from discomfort, try instead gently turning toward it. The more you can train your mind to acknowledge and name and tenderly accept whatever difficulty is here, it won't feel so challenging. Taking one more deep breath in through your nose. Open your mouth, take a big exhale. And then as you're ready, and only when you're ready, you can open your eyes and begin to come back. So, how did that feel in your body? You don't have to reveal too much if it's quite private.
That was really challenging. I tend to anger, so I was trying to address that, and it just really was very, very difficult to, well, first of all, to tap into anger when I wasn't triggered, and then to like recall all the stuff that goes with anger. Yeah, and I have a big letting it go problem, so it was a lot.
So you're human, in other words.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. It was interesting because you used the verb address. And that made me think, does address mean like get rid of it? Or does address just mean see it and be with
like
it?
talk to it,
Okay,
engage
good,
with it.
Good.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
I think especially too, because it's hard enough just as a feeling, isolated, but feelings are never isolated because our relationship to our feelings they're shaped by gender socialization. They're shaped, by our lens.
Right.
And so depending on which feeling it is, that can even complicate it more in terms of feeling like you have permission to be with that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Felt this exercise felt very IFS to me, and I so I kept thinking of I went to sadness. I had a rough morning with the boys. I've been having it's hard to get them out of the house, get them to school on time. And I really lost my temper with Ezzy, especially this morning. So I've been just been weighing on me all morning. So I was trying to go there to sadness. But then I quickly saw oh, sadness isn't alone. Here's here's anger with myself, and here's disgust, and so that was the most challenging thing for me, was to I felt like I was being ping ponged a bit between emotions.
And I don't know what a therapist would say in that moment. If I'm assuming you should trust the ping pong and just let yourself feel what you're feeling, even as you move from emotion to emotion, instead of trying to force yourself to ramrod into one particular emotion to do the exercise. But that's such a good reminder of how fluid and impermanent these feelings are, and the way they overlap too, in the same way we saw in the wheel.
I kept thinking
Suffer
of,
from
oh,
I suffer from
Aw.
anxiety and depression a lot. And so like I always say, like anxiety wakes up with me every single morning, and it's always got to be coped with or dealt with. Like it doesn't ever really go away. So some like I struggle with that impermanence part with that because it's such a part of my daily life. So that's the emotion that I went to. But you know, when you're talking like, you know, how does it, where does it show up in your body? Like, so it shows up in my stomach, it shows up in my chest, and it's like, you know, slightly like burny, you know, kind of a gritty feeling. And I've never really like put those types of connections to it. You know, I just felt it or feel it. And then basically I try to compartmentalize it. So I just like, all right, I'm going to lock that over there in this drawer. Now I got to go do what I got to do for today. So I guess compartmentalizing equals turning away from it versus, you know, turning into it.
Which feels like a superhuman thing that a lot of us have to do to function in the world. You know, you lock it up in the cellar because you have to get out and do your work. And I mean, I think of my grandparents who were poor Southeast Nebraska farmers, and my parents who, their children who had zero emotional capability whatsoever. But as I've done this practice, I've realized they were so poor and they had to work so hard. They did not have the luxury of sitting with their feelings because it was too much. So they had to shove it. They couldn't sit down and articulate it. They had to go plow the field and, you know, butcher the chickens. And there's something, I guess hearing you say that, I just want to say, oh gosh, that's so human. And it's like a survival skill. I think all of us probably have had to figure out how to do in one way or the other. Because if we sit in the ocean of our feelings all day and all night, how do we get a damn thing done? So it's a question
We
of
eat
like,
a lot of chocolate if we
Yeah.
sit in our emotions all day and all night.
yeah, I feel like hungover a little this morning from not drinking, but from like intrusive thoughts that I had in the middle of the night. And so I'm sort of, you know, the practices have been nice for me to just kind of, I guess, witness like, oh, this is like, feels like a tired sort of like, like I did some sort of partying last night or something, except it was not fun. And I'm thinking a lot about, you know, accept the emotion that's here or accept what's here with kindness and compassion. And I think when I first started to explore these practices of, I would lean on folks like Kristen Neff and stuff like this, you know, like talk to yourself like you would a friend. And now I'm sort of in like this aversion moment with that work. I'm grateful that it exists so that we can have some science and language around some of the stuff, but it just doesn't work for me in the middle of an active moment. When like, so last night I was actually like, okay, I'm awoken from my sleep and the thought is still happening, like this dream or whatever is now fully getting fleshed out in my mind. I'm like opening up my eyes on purpose, looking around the room to try and like be like, I'm here right now, and like it's okay. And I'm trying to do that thing, and I'm like, it's not actually. And so I've been really trying to explore like different, like potent, quick practices for like those moments, even though I know the kindness and the compassion is what gets me through like the long distance run, so to speak. I do kind of need like, my first go-to last night was, all right, let me do a mental time travel. I'm going to picture, this was in particular about Volta with like we're going to be in the future doing something, he's smiling. And then that worked for a moment. And then I was like, then went right back to that thought. Like, I was like, yeah, but he's not like in this, so like, then it made me even more sad and fearful. And then I had to do like a second layer, which was like to self-talk, like, Jess, you're having thoughts right now. Jess, these are intrusive. But I had like a you pronoun, so it would distance. And that actually has been helpful. Using the you pronoun. But yeah, it was interesting because I guess I've been practicing those practices for, like Sean, you were saying, like when you have a practice, some of this stuff becomes habitual. But I guess maybe last night, now that I'm just saying this out loud, it was like a habitual moment of like bringing both of those together. Like, oh, this one's not working. Let's bring in like team A or B or whatever. So I guess this is maybe an out loud love letter to exploring different practices, but yeah, still hungover though. Whew, still feel hungover from all that work.
I'm thinking of the image of a tool belt, and like so grateful that you have a bunch of different funky tools on your belt, because the wrench isn't going to be useful at all times, and maybe the hammer is what you need right now. And so like, thank goodness that we have this diversity of tools that we can lean on, because some serve us at different points and moments of our lives better, than others, and that's okay. I think of reparenting, and I think I've mentioned this with Mark Epstein in the past, that he talks about mindfulness as a practice of reparenting ourselves. And so, especially with these emotions, like even Jess, in the way that you switched to the third person and said, Jess, you're having these thoughts right now. It's almost like that could be a caregiver who's saying, okay, you're having these thoughts right now, but I'm here and you're okay. And it's like, I know for me, I think I was 20 years old when I finally had to learn how to feel and how to name these things and reparent myself with all of these kind of practices. But it's an ongoing practice for all of us, assuming that none of us had perfectly perfect parents, which I think is usually accurate in one way or another. But in terms of emotional intelligence, here's an opportunity for us to care for our minds and our bodies with a new flavor of tenderness.
Actually, Rachel, yeah, you nailed it, because when you prompted, like, think of this figure or this essence of a compassionate being, I actually like pictured myself in the bed last night, even though I didn't. I conceptually, my mind was like, yeah, but you're not like, we're not super compassionate to ourselves. Like, it was like I allowed myself to visualize myself as a compassionate being, even though I didn't fully like feel like I was just like, I'm going to intend to put myself in that position right now as a visualization, which kind of made me like ever so slightly be like, oh yeah, okay, I got it. I got myself. Even though, yeah, I'm not fully like, yeah, like step by step, I guess.
I think it's Brene Brown who talks about having a vulnerability hangover. Like when she's super vulnerable, then the next day and she wakes up like, oh shit. And anyway, that's what I thought of when you said this hangover sensation in the morning. Isn't that amazing how the power of emotions lingers in our bodies and our minds, even if it was triggered by, you know, maybe an actual physical event, or maybe just a moment in our minds. It's incredible how it resonates. So we have just a few minutes. Let's see. We may stop there. Let's move on. We have 2 minutes. So feelings are messengers. And this is Susan David's book here. And this is really one of her big messages that, you know, we can look at them as friendly messengers, even if they're anger or fear or terror, they are cueing us to pay attention to something. And maybe they're going to tune us into the fact that there's something we need to take action on. So definitely a homework item for this week is to follow her on Instagram if you don't already. Let's see if I can move you guys up here. There we go. And she talks about emotional agility. So this is the process that enables us to navigate life's twists and turns with self-acceptance, clear-sightedness, and an open mind. And this is where I think she's so useful. She says it's not about ignoring difficult emotions and thoughts. It's about holding those emotions and thoughts loosely, facing them courageously and compassionately, and then moving past them to ignite change in your life. And she has these 4 essential steps of emotional agility. Number 1 is show up. So just face your emotions, turn toward them, as we were saying earlier. Number 2, step out. Detach from habitual stories that keep you hooked. So in that moment when you lose your patience with your kids, you know, maybe you're in this story, I'm a terrible mom, I do this every day. You know, drop that story and come back to where you are. 3, walk your why. Identify your core values and take the long view of your life. And 4, move on. Set goals and make tiny tweaks to your routine. She has a lot of great podcast interviews and a great TED Talk that's also really worth watching. And so these are those 4 key concepts. Again, looking more at showing up. So the key here is that, again, instead of pushing away difficult thoughts or emphasizing only positive thinking, just facing your thoughts, leaning into them with curiosity and kindness, as we've been practicing. Number 2, stepping out, detaching from and observing your thoughts and emotions to see them for what they are. I think of this, you know, Jess, and saying, Jess, you're having these thoughts right now. You had that ability to be the witness observer. And number 3, walking your why. Again, turning to those core values as your compass to keep you on the path. And then 4, moving on. Finding these small daily or deliberate tweaks that can build habits and make a powerful difference in your life. So I think we'll stop there because it's 30 past the hour. And I'm seeing now that there was a comment from earlier. Sorry, guys. Oh, Jess has to go. Okay. Emotions being an automatic appraisal. Yeah, that's great, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, that really resonated. I was like, oh, that's absolutely what they are. It's interesting though too, because sometimes because of whatever history you have, or you know, whatever has been triggered in the past, like it's like I can see how you would say, like, well, yes, it's like an authentic appraisal, like for yourself in the moment, but it can be tied to so much like baggage that maybe it's not, you know, I can get really triggered by something that maybe I don't want to say shouldn't have, or you know what I mean, but like it might yeah, you know, I'm not surprised that there's PhDs on like just this kind of stuff, because it's
Emotion science is a thing. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
incredible. I found myself thinking a lot about PTSD too, as we were talking about that. Like, is it an authentic appraisal? If your PTSD is triggered by the fireworks outside and suddenly your body rushes back to Vietnam in 1970, it's so
Exactly.
complicated and it's so psychosomatic.
Yeah, exactly. So that becomes a task in itself, like to kind of navigate what's what's the real, in that case, like is there a real threat even though my body's like responding? Yeah. IFS.
And that's like the self-awareness comes in, but also evolutionary biology. The fact that you have this lizard brain that has a fight or flight response because it wants to stay alive. So you have to factor that in too, because we're not in control of that.
Right.
So we're not in control, my friends,
We're not in
of
control.
anything.
I had a question. I don't know who said it, but it stuck with me for years. Maybe it was a yoga teacher once, but just the notion that there's only love and fear. And when you started talking about all the different emotions, I was like, but do they all grow out of just love and just fear? So, something to
That's a
ponder.
good question. That makes me think of what Steph Snyder has shared, which is that it's like all behaviors are either love or a call for love.
Oh,
Which
Oh, I
it
like
seems
that.
really spot on, right? I'll have to find
Yeah.
the full quote for you because it struck me too when I first heard it. Let me think on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I should let you all launch into your day. Thanks for
Thank you
doing
so
the
much, Rachel.
emotional deep dive. And we'll
Yeah,
have
that was a lot.
87 more for next week. Yeah. Take good care of yourselves.
Hi,
Thank you,
everybody.
Have a good day.
See you guys.